Who might belong to this? This little angel dangling. Oh. There you go. So go ahead and turn to Acts chapter 12. We are going to open up to Acts chapter 5 just initially, but just as a reminder, thank you for last week. It was a big gamble. I could not believe that everybody just stayed attentive for an hour. If it had been a sermon, it would have been an hour long. And but it went really, really well. I've been getting some great just feedback from folks who have seen the video on Facebook and on YouTube. But last week, if you weren't visiting with us last week, we had Sarah here from Invitation Ministries and her crew, and we did some interviews, and I think it went well, didn't it? Yeah, it was it was great. So this week, it will not be an hour. It'll only be 50 minutes instead of 55. No. But we're revisiting Unchained. We started 2 weeks ago with Unchained, the very first sermon. There's going to be 4 total, and hence the reason why there's a chain on the pulpit. And we're looking specifically at passages in the book of Acts where the disciples are they're in prison, but then they get released from prison. And that's what's going to happen today in Acts chapter 12. But here's the reminder, our 2 key verses, which we'll go through the entire sermon series. Acts chapter 5, verses 41 and 42. If you remember, the disciples have been released from prison. Then they left the presence of the council. They've been forbidden to preach the gospel. And rejoicing that they were counted worthy to suffer dishonor for the name. And when it says the name, who's the name? Jesus. That's pretty simple. And every day in the temple and from house to house, they did not cease teaching and preaching that the Christ is Jesus. And that's a specific phrase. When it says in Acts chapter 5, they did not stop preaching that the Christ, the Messiah, the Savior, his name is Jesus. So they said, we've seen him, he's come, he's been here, let us tell you his story. And so they're compelled to preach this gospel over and over and over again, despite overwhelming persecution. They were locked up the first time in Acts chapter 4. They were locked up and said, you do this again, and boy, you're going to suffer big time. And guess what they did? They went right back out in the temple. They started to preach Jesus, and they get thrown back in jail again in Acts chapter 5. And this time they get beaten before they get sent out. And these guys are they're happy. They're ecstatic. Would you be like that? I mean, really, would you be, hey, this is great stuff. We're getting persecuted for Jesus. How many, on Facebook, which is where a lot of you get your Bible studies nowadays, on Facebook, is that kind of the tone of Christians when they talk about suffering? No. I think they're a little different. So let's look at Acts chapter 12. You're going to see the title here is James. The very first person among the disciples that we pay attention to is James. Now this James, there's 2 Jameses in this passage. There's James, the brother of John, and then there's James. Later on they make reference to James, one of the other Jameses, but this James is the half-brother of Jesus. So Acts chapter 12, verse 1. About that time, Herod the king, important, this is very important, Herod the king laid violent hands on some who belonged to the church. Now this Herod, it gets a little confusing when we read the New Testament. It gets confusing when you see Herod, because there's a bunch of Herods. It's a dynasty. And you know, everybody used to get the same name. With dynasties, you know, like if I had my own dynasty, it'd be the Richard dynasty, maybe. You know, King Richard. I kind of like that, King Richard. That sounds like it's historical. That sounds great. Well, they did the same thing. So Herod the Great was the first one we read in the New Testament, and he was the king of Israel when Jesus was born. Was he a crazy guy? Was he a nice guy? What was he? Oh yeah, this guy was, I mean, he was nuts. He was so crazy. He murdered 2 of his sons because he was afraid they were going to try and take the kingdom from him, plus one of his wives. And he went through wives kind of like some of us go through underwear. So, you know, he was so crazy that he was afraid, and he knew he was Idumean. He wasn't Jewish. He was Idumean. And the Jewish people resented it. But he had grown up with Caesar. This is Octavius, or Augustus Caesar. He had grown up with him, and so that's how he got established as king in Israel, because he was boyhood pals with another crazy person. And you know, this guy, first thing he did when he becomes Caesar is institute Caesar worship, that he believed himself to be a god, and so if you're going to be a Roman citizen, you have to worship me as God. So, you know, are you starting to see a pattern of crazy here? And you thought our politics was crazy. Yeah, so Herod the Great grew up with Augustus Caesar, and they're pals. He becomes king of Israel, and he's so nuts, and the people hate him so much, he decides that on the day he dies, 3,000 notable Jews are going to be rounded up, and they're going to be killed on the day he dies, because he knew the Jewish people wouldn't mourn the day he dies unless he gave them reason to mourn his death. So that was the reason why he wanted 3,000 Jewish people rounded up. They didn't do that. So as soon as, it tells you how popular he was, as soon as he's out of power, everybody says, oh great, we can start to do our own thing. This Herod is his grandson. And this Herod is also king of Israel. He's the first king since his grandfather was king. The others were just tetrarchs, or ruled the 4th quadrant. One of them was his uncle, Herod the Tetrarch, which we see in the majority of the New Testament. This Herod, king, also grew up with Caesar, but this time he grew up with a guy named Caligula. Yeah, so you guys know that name. Yeah, he's a little on the not-so side too. But can you imagine 2 teenage guys, and one of them is a megalomaniac, and the other one is, you know, just this serial killer, basically, of people. And they're teenage friends, and they grow up and they start to be able to dictate over other people. So that's Caligula, and that's Herod. The reason he's growing up with Caesar is because his mother, Mariamne, took him to Rome to get him away from his grandfather, because this Herod's father was one of the 2 sons that Herod the Great had murdered. So this guy grows up to be king of Israel, and his father had been murdered by his own grandfather. I don't know about you, but do you think that sounds kind of dysfunctional? You know, that maybe if you grew up with that sort of thing, that maybe you might be a tad off-center. Okay, am I setting the tone? So this Herod, oh, by the way, I need to give you another bit of trivia. He's also the first in the Herod dynasty to be Jewish, because his mother, Mariamne, was Hasmonean. Hasmonean meant she was part of the Hasmonean dynasty, Real trivia, particularly those of you who maybe grew up in a Catholic background, you're familiar with the Apocrypha. There's a couple of books named after these folks who were the Hasmonean dynasty. First and second Maccabees. She was a Maccabean. And so she's the only Jewish connection that these Herods have. He's king. Well, we've already gotten the first one. That was just the intro. Let's look at verse 2. He killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. Doesn't sound like a really nice guy, does it? And by the way, up until this time, the method of killing political prisoners within the Roman government is crucifixion. However, if they didn't want to make somebody go through that much of a torture, they would have them beheaded with an axe. By this time, they had shifted to a sword. Some traditions tell us that instead of being beheaded by the sword, that James was filleted alive with the sword. We don't know. It just says here that he was killed by Herod, or Herod ordered him killed with the sword. Crazy guy? Probably. But now let's introduce Peter. So look at what happens with Herod's thinking in verse 3. And when he saw that it pleased the Jews, who are the Jews? It's the Jewish rulers, the Jewish leaders, the religious and political leaders of Israel, of Judea, and they're not happy with this Christian sect. So when they see James is killed, they decide, oh, this is good. He proceeded to arrest Peter also. This was during the days of unleavened bread. And when they had seized him, he put him in prison, delivering him over to 4 squads of soldiers to guard him, and tending after the Passover to bring him out to the people. So Peter was kept in prison, but earnest prayer for him was made to God and the church. Let's stop there for just a second, because 16 soldiers are surrounding Peter at this time. So when it says 4 squads, it's 4 squads of 4. By the way, these guys would have lived together. That each group of 8, the 2 groups of 8, would have been in the same tent together. And so this was part of their regiment. He has 4 groups of 4, with the idea that one group would sleep while the other 3 are guarding him. That's important to the story, to pay attention to what goes on here. And notice, here's Peter, he's back in jail again. What does the church do? Praise. That's really important today. If we're really going to talk about what's happening in this passage, one of the big things we need to remember is prayer takes place. However, let me tell you, this is one of the most hilarious passages in the book of Acts. I love this. This ought to, if you really read as an active reader, you ought to read this passage. And at some point, you just kind of, you might start off, oh, that's funny. And then by the time you get to the end of it, if you really pay attention to what's going on, this ought to have you rolling in the aisles. I mean, this is hilarious. You got it? Here's the praying church, verse 6. Now, when Herod was about to bring him out, on that very night, Peter was sleeping between 2 soldiers. By the way, it's likely that the 2 soldiers were sleeping as well, because they're chained together. Each soldier is chained to Peter, bound with 2 chains, 1 to each shoulder. And sentries before the door were guarding the prison. So likely one part of the group, half the group, is sleeping. The other half the group is guarding Peter. 2 of them are chained to him while he sleeps. Here's the chuckle. Really pay attention to this. And behold, an angel of the Lord stood next to him, Peter, and a light shone in the cell. He struck Peter on the side and woke him, saying, "Get up quickly," and the chains fell off his hand. So we don't know how he struck him, but just think, this is an angel. This says something about the nature of angels. Number one, there's some sort of physical presence, because in order to strike Peter, there's got to be a physical body that strikes Peter, right? So here's this angel, and he's standing next to Peter. Peter's asleep. I'm imagining they're guys. The snoring must have been unbearable, right? And so they're snoring away, and the angel decides to wake up Peter. And how would he do that if he strikes up? Probably just kick them, I'm guessing. Have you ever wanted, when somebody's sleeping and snoring, haven't you ever wanted to just kind of, oh, good swift kick, you know? That's all it takes, you know? Would that work with Jerry? Would you want to kick him? Yeah. I'm just, ladies, just so you know, a sharp elbow in their ribs when they're sleeping during my sermons, I really do appreciate that. It's fun to watch, just so you know. So he strikes him to wake him up, and the chains fell off his hands. Do you think that would be to be there and have this happen? All of a sudden you get up, the two soldiers are still sleeping. The chains are laying there on the ground. Would you pay attention? Now Peter, I love Peter. Peter is one of the most comedic people in the New Testament. I love him. And the angel said to him, dress yourself. He had to get dressed. This is all taking place. There's guards standing around. There's 16 guards. Half of them are likely sleeping, but still there's the guys at the doors. There's the guys at the gates. And the angel says, get dressed. You've got enough time to get clothes on. And do some of you, when you wake up in the morning, how many of you, how many of us are morning people? When we get up, we're awake. Yeah, how many are married to somebody who's not like that? Yeah, it's like, this is not a morning person. Half the time, she's not even awake when I leave the house. I mean, she's just not a morning person. And so, here's Peter. Get up, get dressed. You would think most people would at least, while they're dressing, would wake up, right? Now, Peter, dress yourself and put on your sandals. And he did so. And he said to him, wrap your cloak around you and follow me. And he went out and followed him. I'd be paying attention. He did not know that what was being done by the angel was real. I guess it is possible that some of us, when we're going through things like this, would think, well, this is a dream. This is an interesting dream. You know, right? Of course, why does my side hurt? You know, why have I got a bruise there now? Right? But thought he was seeing a vision. When they had passed the first and then the second guard, they came to the iron gate leading into the city. It opened for them of its own accord. You know, it's like one of those things. How many of you grew up with Vincent Price movies rerun? Yeah, you know, I'm just thinking, you know, Lon Chaney's there, and he's the Wolfman or something. I don't know. It just opens up by itself. I love this. And so, when they passed the first and second guard, they came to the iron gate leading into the city. It opened for them of its own accord. They went out and went along one street, and immediately the angel left him. I've actually got this in my studies. I've got this underlined because this is a specific Greek phrase. It literally means when he came in his own mind. So when Peter came to himself, he said, now I am sure that the Lord has sent his angel and rescued me from the hand of Herod and from all that the Jewish people were expecting. It's like the light bulb goes on. You know, I mean, boom, and here's, oh wow, that's kind of cool. You know, and Luke just records when Peter finally, when he got it. Isn't that interesting? Think of yourself. Do you have those moments where life is not all that clear and then all of a sudden the light bulb comes on and then Oh wait, I should have been paying attention. You know, that's basically what's being said here. Peter is not paying attention. Verse 12. He's not the only one. I love Rhoda. I would love to meet Rhoda. When I pass, it's like, okay, I've met all these guys. I'd like to meet all the people, but please introduce me to Rhoda. I've got to find this girl. And when he realized this, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, whose other name was Mark, when many were gathered together and were praying. And when he knocked at the door of the gateway, a servant girl named Rhoda came to answer. Recognizing Peter's voice, in her joy, she did not open the gate, but ran in and reported that Peter was standing at the gate. Do you see why I want to meet Rhoda? I want to meet Rhoda. You left him at the gate. He's being hunted by Herod, and you left him outside of the building. Really? What's wrong with you, girl? They said to her, you are out of your mind. Don't you want to laugh all the time? But she kept insisting that it was so, and kept saying, it is his angel. But Peter continued knocking. Please let me in. They're after me out here. I don't know what he's saying. It doesn't say that, but he just continues to knock. And when they opened, they saw him and were amazed. But motioning to them with his hand to be silent. I imagine that the crowd in the room is so ecstatic that this is going on, but the reason he has to motion is because he can't speak over them. Hey, come on, be quiet. Shut up! I got to tell you something phenomenal. But motioning to them with his hand to be silent, he described to them how the Lord had brought him out of the prison. And he said, tell these things to, I told you, two Jameses. Tell these to James, the half-brother of Jesus, who's kind of, you know, he's kind of the belly button of the church in Jerusalem. He's the guy to go to. Tell these things to James and to the brothers, the apostles. And then he had departed and went to another place. Now when day came, there was no little disturbance among the soldiers over what had become of Peter. And you're going to find out in the next verse why this is so important. You wake up, and there's the chains lying there. And the guy you're guarding is gone. They're not unlocked. They just fell off. You're the guy who was standing at the gate. And all of a sudden, Peter is gone. And you know no one came through that gate. Don't you think you're going to be pretty amazed? Something's going on. What happened? How do we get away with this? Verse 19. And after Herod searched for him and did not find him, he examined the sentries and ordered that they should be what? Yeah. This was serious business, wasn't it? Then he went down from Judea to Caesarea and spent time there. Unchained. As we look at these passages, a purpose of having us look at these passages is because, remember this key. Remember the key. It's the gospel. And every one of us holds the gospel in our heart. Every one of us has salvation for those that we have, that we know, that we love. Every one of us possess this truth. We have the key to heaven. And yet, we're so good at just not sharing it. And generally, what keeps us from doing that are chains. I mean, Peter's locked up. I mean, literally locked up. But one of the reasons this passage is so important is because he was unchained in another way. I don't think it's an accident that Luke records that he came to himself. You know, he's walking through all of this, and it's too much of a dream. And I'm wondering, there's a part of me, because this hasn't happened to me, I haven't been released from prison. Just so you know, the only time I've been in prison was to visit people there. So I have been there, but I haven't been locked up in there. So this sort of thing, I just kind of look at, and I'm just amazed. This is not the first time this has happened to Peter. Remember, we started studying this 2 weeks ago, chapter 5. We started at chapter 5, but then backpedaled to chapter 4. And the same sort of thing had already happened to them. By the way, because this is Herod, the grandson of Herod the Great, we know for a fact that he died in AD 44. Likely, what we read here today is AD 43. So we likely have a good date. Now keep in mind, the church has been around for over 10 years. There's plenty of experience and had some pretty fantastic things been happening. Remember Ananias and Sapphira? I love this for the offering. We gave the offering. They bragged about what they really didn't give, and boom, they fell dead. Peter had already been released from prison. They'd seen things, just amazing things take place, because we've got all those other chapters in between 5 and 12, don't we? And here, he has this thing happen, and he had to finally wake up, unchained, to realize just how much God was doing in his life. And he had seen so much already. I think we need to be unchained sometimes in our thinking, because God's bigger than we can imagine. When we come to our senses, what happens? I mean, really, what happens? When we start to think about what the church could do, what we could do as part of the church. And think about this. Half of our congregation is gone right now. When I came here 3 years ago, it was scary. I had left a church of several hundred in Florida to go to a small church in Montana and then watch that church grow. Then I left that church, which was smaller than the large church in Florida, and I come to a church that we were lucky to have 40 people. You have to realize this morning we have almost double that amount, and half of the congregation is gone. I'm thinking we should have a picnic, by the way, every week. That might be a factor. I don't know. And I just marvel at what God does all the time when we just get out of the way and let him do his thing. Now, there's one other little point I want to make. Do you realize how serious this business was they were about? I mean, Peter was pretty serious about preaching that Jesus was the Christ. He had been forbidden to do it. He had been threatened not only with lockup, but we're going to beat you, and if that's not enough, it's going to be worse. And right now, Herod's out to kill him. But Herod was pretty serious too, wasn't he? I mean, Peter disappears, and what's his first solution? He had 16 men killed. And that's pretty serious, isn't it? And this whole gospel thing, just spreading it, sharing it, is pretty serious in the world still 2,000 years later. I mean, this is significant, isn't it? But do you realize who else is serious? God. This is God's serious business. And one of the things we struggle with, I think, is remembering he's serious about what we do as a church as well. He's serious about what we do in life as well. And he does some pretty phenomenal things around us all the time, doesn't he? I mean, and we forget. I mean, we do forget. I don't know. I haven't gone to sleep chained between two guards and then woke up and, kicked by an angel and have the chains gone and, hey, come on, get dressed, we're going to go out of here. But I've seen some pretty phenomenal things in my time. But I've also seen a lot of people, a lot of times, just not being quite serious as God is serious. We let a lot of things get in the way of our faith. That God could even do big things. I think He can. Are you struggling with some issues in your life right now? Some people maybe that are a concern for you? Are there some folks in your life that, man, you just want to see a change in their life? Whether it be in their behavior or their health. Whether it be, released from some sort of prison. Do you know somebody who's dealing with alcoholism or addiction? Maybe you are. And, are there some things that, and the only person who can solve it is God, and you really need Him to come alongside you. But you're more like Peter than you're like David. You're living through some of this stuff, and you just think it's a vision, you think it's a dream. I'm just going to encourage you to do something different tonight. Turn off the voodoo, the idiot box, whatever you normally do. Just turn it off and go and sit outside. And wait for night to fall. And pay attention to what's around you. Take it as night drops, and let's pray that it's not cloudy tonight. But take a look at we've got a wonderful front yard and a backyard. We've just got this beautiful place that God's gifted us with. And it's fun to watch the critters run around. It's fun to take a look at the trees, but also to look up and see the stars in the sky. See the sunset or the sunrise in the morning. You realize that there is an intellect behind all that, designed all that for His pleasure, and we just get to sit here and watch it and just be amazed at how big it is. But do you realize that you can just be amazed at how smart God is and what kind of things He does by looking at the small things too? So that's why I urge you to go and sit on your porch tonight. Just pay attention as the night falls. And we had a debate this week about this. Do you call them fireflies or lightning bugs? Lightning bug. I think it's a regional thing, whether it's a lightning bug or a firefly. Just be amazed at that. And in the words of a friend of mine, a guy I went to college with, if Cease was here, she'd know exactly what I'm talking about. Philip Smith. Something's not right about that boy. But he's in his 50s now, and there's still something I'm not sure about him. But he posted something profound. And I like this. And it's about lightning bugs. Don't you think that if God can make a bug's butt light up, He can answer your prayers? I like that. That's pretty good. So I'm gonna look at a firefly, imagine his butt lighting up, and I'm gonna think of God now. Thank you. Yeah. But there is a beauty to it, isn't it? And so as a reminder, with that sort of power that God, that He can create the stars, and billions upon billions upon billions of light years away, those stars shine, and they're stars. They're suns. And then He can create that bug and put that right in front of you, so creating light in two different ways. Do you remember what was happening behind the scenes while Peter's in jail and then boom, the angel comes? There was a church there that was praying. The next time you pray, don't pray like it might happen. Pray like there's a God who lights up the butts of bugs, and He's listening, and He might just light up the butt of that bug for you. Do you have somebody you want to pray for? Do you have a situation that needs to be prayed about? And do you need a God that can make a star, or that can make a bug that lights up? answer that prayer, then do it. Let's stand and be dismissed. Again, as a reminder, don't run off. We've got this picnic. Hang around. If you're thinking it's time to join this church, talk to me. If you're thinking it's time to make a commitment to Christ, talk to me. We're going to be here. I am going to change levels. But we're going to go down to the Plateau and we're just going to have a good old time. But don't leave here without making a decision for God. Father, we just thank you that you are that incredible God that pays attention to what's going on around us. And Father, you can send an angel to release a guy from prison. And Father, we need that sort of miracle in our life right now. I don't know everybody's story, but I do know that there are some that are just struggling with prison sort of issues. They're struggling with somebody in their life or something in their life that just needs to change. So Father, we're asking you as a church that believes in a God who can speak a star into existence, but you can also dream of a bug that lights up at night. And you can make that happen. And we just ask, Father, that beyond our faith, you just answer our prayers. So that, Father, our faith in you might increase. We give you thanks. In Jesus' name, amen. Phil.